So the history of the Find Your Way project, and I appreciate some people might be a bit more schooled up than others on this. So the history of it was obviously in 2000, there was a major event around the world, COVID-19, and there become a massive rise in the use of map run, both via clubs. It was the only way that clubs could put on activities and semi-events for, to keep their members active. And obviously map run existed before this, but this was the biggest rise in popularity and awareness of the app that we saw within the UK. At that time, I wasn't working for British Orienteering. I was a volunteer for Pendle Forest Orienteers. I'd recently just joined the club. And at that time, I worked as a primary school teacher, delivering sport and forest school for my primary school at the time. And we had worked, and I say we as in Pendle Forest at that time, we had worked with the School Sports Partnership previously in little bit. So we had a semi kind of connection with them early 2000. And they got in contact with us early 2000 to see if we could do anything, putting on trails around the community that people could do in their own time, obviously socially distanced. And we decided to try our hand with map run. Put on maybe at that time 4 or 5 different map run courses around different areas around Rosendale, which is an area where the club are based. And the School Sports Partnership, Rosendale School Sports Partnership, took this on, did it throughout Easter, through all the way throughout to the end of summer, and kind of used that as their main competition arm to get their young people, and it varied from 6 to about 18, out and active in the local area. And throughout that period, we got just shy of 600 children take part in the competitions, which had prizes on them from local businesses. This was all organised from the Rosendale School Sports Partnership end. And it was a great way to kind of get the sport out there. So again, still at this time, I wasn't working for British Orienteering. The club were contacted at the start of January to give some figures about what we did, how we did it, what was successful and what wasn't successful. British Orienteering made a bid at that point to Sport England to try and replicate what Pendle Forest did around East Lancashire and see if they could kind of expand that wider. And again, at this point, I still wasn't working for British Orienteering. So I sent all the figures over to Peter Brook at the time, thought nothing of it. And then about 9 months later, a job opportunity came along for the new project, which was at this time unnamed. I decided I had enough of teaching. I went for the job, managed to get it successfully. And that was the start of what is now the Find Your Way project. So that was in November 2021. The funding actually started at the end of August in 2021. So these are the original KPIs from Sport England. So on the original bid, takes a lot of effort, obviously, to put in a bid for funding. And at this time, Sport England were very much KPI focused and very much quantitative focused, and they were very keen that we delivered to certain targets, which is perfectly fine because they're the ones that are funding. And these were the key KPIs that they sent through to us. They wanted us to work across 12 areas across the 3 years. They wanted us to work in 144 schools, train up 192 teachers. And when we say train, it would be that they understand virtual orienteering courses, they could deliver them themselves. Hopefully they could map them themselves with some training so that when the funding ended, the legacy of the sport and legacy of virtual orienteering would carry on. They wanted to have at least 1,000 participants per year in years 1, 2 and 3. And they wanted to have at least 10 volunteers per club recruited, per year, should I say, recruited in years 1, 2 and 3 as well. So that was what we were working to with the initial targets from Sport England. And just a quick note on Sport England, they are funders for a lot of projects that you are probably aware of or probably not aware of in your areas. They work with national governing bodies, they work with active partnerships, They work with your local primary healthcare networks. They are responsible pretty much for the health and well-being and the activity side of things across England. And this funding was just for English clubs only. So this was to be a British orienteering and a club-led place-based. And I don't want to get too much down on the lingo, but Sport England are massive on place-based collaboration. So all that means is that it's not a one-size-fits-all. We work within specific places and we try and tailor make the packages that are right to each place. If something works in Luton, for example, it might not work in Cumbria, it might not work in Northumberland. So they were really keen for us to work with the local clubs and local partnerships to try and make it as place-based as it is with local trusted partners. And by that, I mean the NHS, active partnerships, councils, etc. They wanted us to introduce new fully funded orienteering activities right into the heart of low socioeconomic areas. So I'll explain how we did that further on, but they wanted us to target the most hard to reach people and the least active people with our virtual orienteering offer as well. They wanted us to train community leaders and teachers, as I've said, how to access virtual orienteering courses. And they made it very clear from the start that the funding was not to increase participation at orienteering events or raise our own membership level. So we had to bear that in mind. Obviously they would love for that to be kind of like a knock-on effect to the Find Your Way project, but the money itself had to go at introducing orienteering activities and not at trying to raise our own membership levels. And that was something that we kind of, I wouldn't say struggled to get across the clubs to begin with, but obviously, clubs we want people to join us as clubs, we want more participation at our events, and it was kind of that weaning clubs off that mentality and that we just need to put activities on for activity's sake and and hope that those things come with us. So this was the official brief that we came up with jointly with Sport England. It was a joint project to develop positive experiences, and these were their words, of orienteering through virtual orienteering activities aimed at children, young people and families in hard to reach places. And then by connecting people with green spaces. I mean, green spaces for them, Sport England means anything from a park to a strip of grass, to a country park. They actively use the word green spaces for a lot of a variation of spaces, and in the hope that people become more active through virtual orienteering opportunities. And at this point, the term virtual orienteering was kind of rife within the sport. It summed up the offer. And this was what Sport England were aware of, our partnerships were aware of, and the local councils, etc. So how did it all begin? So we began, and I say we as in I started with a blank slate. There was no kind of we'd never done this before as British Orienteering. The funding was totally separate. It did not come from any funding that normally comes through for us from Sport England. It did not come from the membership. It did not come from any British orienteering levies. It was a pot of funding that to use it in a way that has never been done before. So what we did was we researched and started to contact influential local partnerships that I've talked about, school sports partnerships, active partnerships, to see what was going on in the area. If there was a need for it in the area, would they be interested in what we were trying to achieve? We did a brief audit of clubs, if clubs, had anything to offer in terms of areas, in terms of personnel. What we were keen on was that it didn't become an onerous task for clubs to be involved, but obviously we could not have delivered this without the clubs as well. So an invitation was sent out to all of the English clubs, stating the brief, stating our aims. Did they want to be a part of it? And luckily for us, within, a couple of months, we had 7, 8, 9 clubs that came on board with us at the start of year 1 and said, this sounds interesting. We'll see where it goes. So it was really chicken and egg to begin with the start of the project. You needed clubs on board, but we didn't have the partnerships on board at that time, and we needed partnerships on board, but we didn't quite have the clubs. So it was a lot of juggling acts of, this is ideally what we want to do in 4 or 5 months down the line. would you like to be a part of it? And as I've said, we've had clubs that were with us from the start until the very end, that believed in us, and clubs that have joined us along the way. And without those clubs and without the vision that those clubs had, the project wouldn't have been half the success as it was. So from this, at the start of the year one, so we're talking early 2022, we developed the Find Your Way website. We purposely had done some research into it and spoke with Sport England about how to make it easy in terms of kind of visualizing it, the logo, what is important for people to use. And we were aware that we already had the Go Orienteering website. But what we developed with the Find Your Way website was something that was more specific with imagery, about virtual orienteering, easy to kind of understand where they can meet the clubs, download the maps from, etc. We created some social media pages. We created banners, flags, and signage. So all of the clubs got sent roller banners, all of the clubs got sent park banners, feather flags, you name it, with all of the branding on, trying to really give out information, as you can see with the roller banner that's there, like go on an adventure with your phone that they could use for come and try it events, and try and deliver as much as we could on the ground to clubs that they could literally just open up a pack at a come and try it event, pop it up, and all of the branding will be there, easy to understand and attractive to people. And we developed videos. There's a Find Your Way video on the website, and how-to guides as well, because obviously, it's easy. I don't want to say it's easy for us in the sport, but once you've used MapRun, it's easy to use, and we intrinsically know how to use it. But trying to get the people which we were aiming for, the least active, the most hard to reach, trying to get them to try something new in the first place and then to try it with technology. These are the barriers that we were facing. So we developed simple how-to guides, sent them across to active partnerships, sent them across to lots of our partners to distribute and try and break down the barriers to people downloading and trying the app that way. So I won't read through all of this, but one of the initial challenges that we had in year one, quite obviously, going back to the KPIs from Sport England, where they wanted it to be a very school-based kind of focus, was the mobile phone policies in schools. I can't think of one primary school that allowed mobiles, and certainly none that we communicated with across the country. Very few secondary schools did. Some very rarely had a bank of mobile phones that they could use, or tablets. And increasingly we're coming up against schools saying, this sounds fantastic, however, this is our policy. Whenever we spoke to active partnerships, for example, they were very wary about using schools, and councils were, because they couldn't access the grounds. So if we mapped a school for a map run course, a Find Your Way course, how accessible would that be to the community once the school gates are locked? Can we get people onto the site to map it correctly? And every kind of challenge that we were coming up with schools was making it harder and harder to stick to the initial KPI with Sport England. And it became more apparent with discussions from clubs that it made more sense that we would start to look at parks that were local to clubs, for example, but local to schools, should I say, for example, that maybe the effort should be that we start to look at utilising this park as a hub that is close to 4 or 5 schools, rather than 4 or 5 schools, map them separately, and the activities were all done separately that way. So this, at the start of year one, probably 6 months into year one, this was an open conversation that we had with Sport England. We went back to them. They check in regularly on us anyway, but we went back to them and stated these challenges, and they were, very understanding. We decided collectively to move it more towards a community-based project with the KPIs. And at that time as well, what's important to kind of realise is that Sport England itself did a massive shift change in their policies. So instead of it being more about qualitative results, about the numbers and the feet and, how many people have you got through the door, etc., Sport England themselves, across the country with all their projects that they were funding, not only ours, they went more to a quantitative. So they went more to the so what's. And there's a quote at the bottom from the Sport England CEO that basically says that why they shifted. They need to make it easier for partners to do what they need to do to level up and deliver without being so focused on numbers. So for us, this shift of focus from it being teachers and school-based to more community-based and community members was welcomed by Sport England, and it fitted in perfectly with their own shift change of let's see what we can do. Don't worry about numbers. What can we learn from it as well? The second kind of challenge that we faced initially as well was data capturing with MAPRUM. Peter Effney has always supported the project from the very start and still does to this day, as does Pat McLeod, his right-hand man, for want of a better word, in England. But for obviously with MAPRUM, I wouldn't want to say we were panicking, but there's an obvious kind of drawback with MAPRUM that if one person's doing it on the phone, for us, they might be a family and they might have 4 or 5 children. And we were needing to capture that 4 or 5 children for our Sport England figures rather than the one person that was using it on the phone. And, you know, Peter Effney wanted to keep the user face as simple as possible. And so that was kind of a real challenge for us about how do we kind of capture the data we need to do to meet our KPI targets, and yet at the same time work with Peter. It's his app, you know, without MapRun, there wouldn't be this project there as well. We agreed with Peter to have the data shared monthly, and for a payment of 50 Australian cents per run was agreed. So we funded Peter right from the very start, and I'll explain a bit more in future, but we funded him on developments in every single run that's been made with the MapRun app as well. So very briefly, and I won't go through all this again, but the way that we kind of overcame that challenge to begin with was registers. We asked clubs to capture as much data as they could with registers, and we appreciate that this is quite time heavy and quite resource heavy, but we needed again the figures. So if, for example, clubs were holding a come and try it event where there was find your way courses on, and they knew that one person was there with a phone, please add on how many people went round with them. Or, for example, if a club led an activity in a school and the teacher went round with one of their phones or a school tablet, how many pupils were with them. And this was the same for come and try it events, to cover kind of safety, first of all, you know, poor network, but secondly, data capturing as well. We heavily encouraged and gave out templates for clubs to send out post come and try it events of thank you for attending, this is what you can do following on, this is your local club, for example. So it wasn't, you know, it wasn't ideal, but we tried to, as best as we could, to capture data. And when we started doing it this way and clubs would send the registers back after each event, what we were finding was that there were kind of disparities. You know, we'd get the figures from that 20 people had done the Find Your Way course, but in actual fact, the numbers were more like 65 and 70 when you added on the children that were there, or the partners that were there, or the grandma that was going around as well. So at the end of the year, we kind of did a ratio as to the average of what the app was telling us and what the registers were telling us as well. So we managed to cover 21 areas over the project. We were only asked to cover 12, but we managed to cover 21 areas with a similar amount of clubs. And we, at first, I didn't mean for it to be such a spread out kind of area. We were probably thinking to keep it quite condensed in terms of manageable, but it turns out naturally that we've managed to cover quite a big spread of England brilliantly. And as we said, like, you know, all these areas weren't there from the start. Some joined us in years 2, some joined us in year 3, some were there from the start. But what we have managed to do is we have managed to cover, you know, over 20 clubs, over 21 areas with the project, and hopefully affect them in a positive way. So very briefly, Jason can see one of your pictures here, but the main method that we did the Find Your Way project was we encourage clubs to get out there. You know, the best way that we found was with come and try it events, with training for local schools, with training for local health partnerships. We encourage clubs to get mapping. and I'll explain a bit more about that in a bit. Get creating virtual orienteering courses, make connections, hold free activities, meet the partners. And clubs weren't just sent off to do this. Jason, is very confident and very experienced in this, and did go off and do all this by himself, and did absolutely fantastic in Dorset. But there were many clubs that we held a hand with, and I myself I was setting up meetings with partners. I was setting up meetings with councils to get areas permissions to be mapped, and going down and doing the free activities with clubs as well. So again, it was very place based. Dorset didn't need anything from us apart from some support, some funding, some promotion, whereas certain other areas needed kind of like a heavy touch, and it varied from place to place. But this is what we encourage clubs to do, either with the help of myself or through utilizing people like Jason. As the years went on, we refined our offer. Rather than just hold a come and try it day where it's a find your way map run course, which might be a bit intimidating to people that don't understand orienteering, and then it's got an app to learn and everything like that. We heavily pushed clubs to link in with existing events that were going on in the community as well, whether it's like a active leads event, a breeze event, a community event, to add in other activities such as traditional, I'll call it, but a yellow course, put a yellow course on round the park, to add in a maze. We heavily, assuming that's you, Jason. I'll give him a second. There we go.
Sorry, everybody. Sorry about that. Thank you. Great to have been involved and leading it, Kay.
I was going to say, I've just been praising you, Jason. So we encourage clubs with a bit of feedback and a bit of learning from the years as we're going on to refine the offer, utilize sponsored ads, tag in with partner promotion. As you can see there, we Beat the Street, which is a nationwide UK intelligent health kind of activity that goes on. Clubs improve their social media, as you can see on the bottom right hand side from D Orienteering Club, D-side Orienteering Club. So as the offer went on, as the years went on, we kind of honed it down to kind of like a well-oiled machine where there was a lot more going on to entice people to come in the first place, and then to keep them there as well. So as I've just said, D-side Orienteering Club, they had some fantastic things, but working right back to the start of the project, it's strange to think now, but Saxons, Wessex, Southampton Orienteering Club didn't have Instagram pages, and help was there to get these off the ground, and yet now these pages are flourishing. Clubs were had info like this developed for them that went on the back of, say, like the Find Your Way maps that gave out information about local events that are coming up, where you can find other virtual orienteering courses and permanent orienteering courses. So stuff like this became the norm for the event and the norm for clubs to be kind of handing out at events, and social media presence from the clubs that are involved, especially from the first year clubs as well, just grew and improved massively. So these are some of the partners that we worked with. As you can see, there's some kind of heavy hitters there, and this is the kind of message that I want to get across from this webinar, is to be brave and to go out there, because a lot of these partners are trying to do the same as us. They're trying to get more people more active, and a lot of the times they don't have the time and they don't have the staffing to do it. And they love when NGBs and clubs go to them and say, I've got this activity, would you support us? What do you think about this? And a lot of the time the answer is yes. So we've got Canal and Rivers Trust there, we've got Natural England, we've got NHS, Yorkshire Sport Foundation. These are heavy hitters, as you can imagine, whether it comes to permissions, whether it comes to landowners, whether it comes to kind of promotion, that I basically, and Caroline and Connor that took on the work after I moved on to my different role, basically just sent them an email and just said, listen, this is going on. Are you interested? If you're not interested, do you know somebody that will be, or do you know community groups as well? So these are just a handful of the people that we've worked with the project. And we did have to get clubs out of the comfort zone at the start, in years one, and especially the biggest thing that we had to get clubs out of the comfort zone was to use the funding. We couldn't really give the money away. There was funding there to pay for the mapping, the mapping time, the expertise. With that, it was hard to get clubs to map unusual areas or areas that they might think are too small for a club event, or you could only hold a level D event there, and so we had to bring clubs round to that it was worth it, because actually our partners are just looking for something that's a 15-20 minute activity, and that park that might be too small for a regional event is actually perfect for this. And it took a while to encourage clubs to take up the funding. A lot of clubs, as you know, are used to never having funding and stuff is paid for themselves, or don't worry, it's a hobby, so it was kind of like twisting the arm for it, and giving clubs confidence to work with local authorities, councils, active partnerships. As I've just said, they're not bogeymen, they're not scary people. They are there to be utilised, and to drop the lingo. A lot of clubs kind of still to this day are talking about bearings and compasses at come and try it events, or even just basic stuff like, a yellow course, for example. So it was really kind of working with clubs to say, let's just, instead of talking about a yellow course, let's just call it short, medium, and long. Or let's not talk about compasses and bearings. Let's talk about utilising handrails, but don't call them handrails, just call them fences. And it's that getting clubs out of the comfort zone. And and to be fair to the clubs, after a couple of come and try events where they were talking to people, you could see the confidence rise massively. So a couple of months ago, at the end of the Find Your Way project, we paid for an independent review of the Find Your Way project by Sports Structures, that are renowned in this field of work for many national governing bodies and sports across the country. And again, one of the challenges that they found at the end was the pushback from the traditional attitudes from existing club members. There was still a heavy pushback. It's not real orienteering, or if it's not going to grow the club membership, what's the point? And we totally understand that, and we totally understand about volunteer time and how precious that is. But there was some fantastic kind of leaders, Find Your Way leaders within the clubs, that probably took on too much themselves, because their members maybe didn't engage as we hoped they would in terms of helping out with come and try it events. And we're forever grateful for these kind of leaders that stepped up and kind of jockeyed their club and kind of were the spearhead for it. But we still found the traditional pushback, as did Sports Structures, from speaking to clubs as well. And that's something that we've got to think of. We all say we want the club to grow, the sport to grow and to change, etc. And then sometimes when you try and doing it, it's like, well, yeah, I do, but not like that. So it's, if you always do what you've always done, you always get what you always get, don't you? So it's how do we bring those members on board to say, this is not to replace your regional events, it's not to replace a national event, it's not to replace a sport, but actually, if we engage with these people, it helps the sport massively, from awareness, from getting people in, from getting people talking about, from getting people turning up to a level D event, and yeah, so that was a shame, but it was an expected kind of comeback that we got from the Sports Structures review. The second one, which is what I've just talked about, was the lack of volunteers. And again, I don't think we ever had a come and try it event cancelled by a club or not put on by a club when they said they were going to. But again, it was probably the same people that were delivering the come and try it events. And I said at the start, we didn't want this to be an onerous kind of task for the clubs to be. We didn't want it to be, we've got to do this now. But the lack of kind of volunteers was something that maybe we could have we did try to address with our own staff, with Caroline and Connor going down, myself attending events. But yeah, the volunteer kind of engagement, how can we change that in the future where it's not onerous, but again, we bring the volunteers and the members on board with us, that they do want to be involved, so we can put on more events like this. So the impact. So I'll get into some figures now, even though I said to you a minute ago that Sport England weren't interested in figures anymore, and they're not. However, the figures that we had rounded up by Sports Structures at the end of the 3-year project spoke for themselves, really, about all of the effort that's gone in from everybody that was involved in it. So we had over 6,000 people that took part in the Find Your Way activity, whether this was on the app, via register, school competition. So, for example, some school sports partnerships did summer competitions using MapRun. They were getting 200 or 300 people through them. Community days, and this was actually over a 200% increase on what Sport England wanted us to do to begin with. So from us kind of thinking, how are we going to get all these people even trying a map run event? We were thrilled to see those figures afterwards. We had over 380 people trained to deliver a virtual orienteering activity, and these still included teachers. I know I said that we took a shift focus from schools, but the middle group that you'll see here with my cursor and this group down here, they were part of the Manchester Outdoor Educational Trust. Caroline Bartram did some training with them in the summer just gone in 2024, and they were school teachers. So it wasn't that we shifted our focus totally to community leaders. As you can see, we had scouts there. We had, people from active partnerships in the bottom left, for example. Almost 400 people now across England understand what MapRun is. They understand how to complete a MapRun course. They understand how to talk about a MapRun course to their group. And I would say approximately half of these understand how to make their own, whether on check sites or whether using Purple Pen, and how to send that to their local MapRun admin as well. This was one of a fantastic kind of extra kind of impact that came from the funding, and Jason Faulkner, again, we've got to thank for this, had installed some of these boards in Dorset before the project had even started, and sent me across a picture of one that he'd put in Dorset somewhere, saying, what do you think about these? And they are absolutely fantastic, and the councils absolutely love them. We have not had one council turn us down to put any of these in our green spaces across England. So what these are A2 or A3 boards. We've designed them in-house. So British Orienteering have designed them. Clubs have sent us their information, their QR codes, their websites, for example. And what we've done basically is we've enabled, hopefully, people that are just passing in the park to understand a bit more about virtual orienteering courses, have a quick look at the map, how to download the app, how to find information about partners. So the one that you see here takes you through to the active Blackburn with Darwin, should I say, wellbeing site, a bit more about Pendle Forest Orienteers and how to get going. And these really do work. The one on the left there is an A2 board fitted in Kent. What we've had in Pendle Forest is we've had one of these in a local park where we've done no come and try it events whatsoever. We haven't publicised them apart from what's on our website, easily to use. And yet the one where we've had the board is one of the most used map runs from people that we don't know. So it just goes to show that people are interested, and these have been absolutely fantastic, and we've funded them from the Find Your Way project. We've had 113 new mapped areas. And again, as I said before, some of them won't be used for proper orienteering, and I say proper in speech marks, usual orienteering events, but some will. And I would say probably 70 of those events, 70 of those areas, should I say, could be used for events by clubs, and even though the Find Your Way project has ended, this now is still mapped. It's an area that clubs can use for their own training, their own map runs for their own level D, level C events. And we've had over 400 new courses that have been created, again, by clubs as well. This was, again, one of the Sports Structures kind of impact reports results. And this was one of them that kind of really hit home of what we were trying to do. And the partner service, so say partners, we're talking active partnerships, we're talking local councils that were interviewed, NHS partners, Natural England, for example. how likely are your organisation to continue participating or promoting orienteering? And every single one has said very likely or somewhat likely, and that's absolutely fantastic. It wasn't in the figurative KPIs that Sport England sent us, but that is 100% what we want. These people now know about the sport, whether it's, permanent orienteering courses, whether it's virtual, whether it's events. They know that we're there now. They know that we're a good organisation to work with. And more importantly, they know that the local club is there for them as well. So I guess the biggest thing that I've banged on about in the past 3 years is the wider highlights. So taking away the figures and taking away, that so and so's done so and so many map runs, and it's the wider benefits that the sport would not have achieved without the Sport England funding and without the Find Your Way project as well. So everything that you go and see has been funded by the Find Your Way project, and has had so many ripple kind of effects throughout the sport that it's just been kind of phenomenal to see. So first of all, I don't think DSI will mind me saying, but they came into the project in year one, and they were very open about not being able to use social media very well. They couldn't advertise as best as they wanted to. They had stopped their school league the year before, and they wanted to restart it, etc. So what the Find Your Way project did via Connor Smith, who was employed via the Find Your Way funding, was that they had social media training via Connor, how to use Facebook, how to set up an Instagram account, how to promote your events, what terminology, etc. And anybody that has seen D-side kind of information recently, compared to 3 years ago, it has just been absolutely phenomenal. The emails that they send out, the information that they send out, and that's like a massive kind of kudos for D for recognizing that in the first place. But again, that was all kind of like spearheaded from the Find Your Way project. We've been able to attend the Manchester Peace Schools Conference, for example. So that there was a couple of courses that were around the Etihad. We got teachers out, we got them, exploring virtual orienteering courses around there. And from there, we met the Manchester Parks contact. And it doesn't sound a lot, but then that had a ripple effect into CLOC and their permissions and their park permissions, etc. We had an initial contact with the Manchester Outdoor Education Trust, MOE, at this event. And again, as you'll see on a further slide, that's had massive effect. So again, this funding that, British Orienteering would never have been able to do, has just kind of like set off a fire for different parts of the sport as well. One of the great things that Epoch did in West Yorkshire, the funding went towards, some of the funding for their club went towards working with the Wakefield School Games Coordinator. So within Wakefield, within the Outward Academy schools, their schools are now mapped. And I go back to saying we didn't want schools mapped individually, but their schools games organizer specifically went to Epoch and said, what can we do? We have this love of orienteering, we have this interest of orienteering. So the Find Your Way project paid for the mapping of these schools. A teacher from each school was trained by the club development officer. They even were trained on how to update their own maps and create their own maps using purple pen, etc. And their pupils all could experience proper orienteering on a proper orienteering map within their own grounds, and then come together for a collaborative event as well. So even though the event that they did wasn't virtual orienteering, it was proper orienteering, again in speech marks, there were map run courses that were put within the school, and all of this again only was created from the Find Your Way project. Beat the Street I've talked about in other webinars. It's a public health initiative that is basically orienteering by stealth, and this is UK wide. There's games going on in Scotland that are about to start, and again in Burnley. And this basically, there's beat boxes on lampposts and street furniture around a certain area, and schools, people, public are encouraged to visit as many beat boxes they can in 6 weeks, build up points, etc. It is massive in areas, and we've managed to become trusted partners of Beat the Street. We're now linked in with every single game that they have with their club development officers, with their own development officers. Information is sent to the pupils that take part. Over 100,000 pupils took part in 2024, and every single pupil that takes part now is directed to local anytime orienteering, permanent, virtual, their local clubs, etc. So this was what we did. I appreciate it's quite a busy slide, but with Manchester Outdoor Education Trust, which again, we only met through the Find Your Way funding at being part of the Manchester Schools Conference. So this year, well, last year just gone in 2024, Caroline delivered a series of 9 workshops that were after school in parks across Greater Manchester. And again, that only got permission because we met the parks officer at the Manchester Schools Conference to deliver orienteering training, how to create your own map runs, how to understand map runs, etc. Most of the groups that took part, most of the people that took part were in IDACI 1 to 3 areas. So for the people that are not too sure what that means the areas of high poverty. Again, tying into what Sport England wanted us to do. And these were brilliantly successful. There was a survey sent out, as always, to people that took part. 67% changed the perception of orienteering, had already taken their groups out to try some of the courses. And this survey was only sent out 2 or 3 weeks after the training had finished. So there was that much enthusiasm from the people that took part in this series of training. Happy Hearts were one of the clubs that kind of joined us as the funding was coming to the end, but still made a massive impact. They managed to get the High Sheriff to some events, probably seeing what Dorset had done with a lot of the mayors attending some of the Come and Try events. But what Happy Hearts did brilliantly well was they got some A3 boards into parks. They mapped a lot of the green spaces, and it was such a shame that they kind of came onto it quite late. But they managed to get stuff on the radio and social media, council healthy hubs. So they started making connections that have continued to this day from being part of the Find Your Way project. One of the biggest things that we have done with the funding was we've attended conferences where we probably would not have attended before. We visited the National Outdoor Expo in Birmingham last year, which was absolutely brilliant. Myself and Howard were there, and probably didn't stop talking for 2 full days. But what we did there was we didn't promote any local clubs. We didn't promote kind of any local events. We had a predominant aim of promoting the anytime orienteering offer. So, the permanent orienteering courses, the virtual orienteering courses, how people can get started in their own time. And, as the feedback, as we gave the feedback on the expo, we had so many people come to the stand, and so many people asked us, first of all, do you have to join a club? And when we said, no, you don't have to join a club to do any events, and we have this offer of Go Orienteering website where you can find courses in your own time, etc. That was when people started to talk to us, because there's a real kind of shift change in people's attitudes these days that, there's a lot of clubs out there. There's not a lot of time out there. They don't want to be part of clubs necessarily straight away. They just want something that fits in with them in their own time. And that was the biggest thing, that people were coming to a stand and asking us, like, how can they get involved, but to suit them, to suit their family. And what we had was an orienteering trail. So we worked with partners. We did 11 or 12 partner stands. They had to go round, look out for the orienteering flag that were on the stand, get the code, etc., and bring it back to be part of a prize draw, which was sponsored by Instinct, one of the JK sponsors kindly. We got their information that we could then follow up past the expo. And as you can see from a bit of the stats that I've just pulled from a different recording slide, within a matter of weeks, there was over 400 more people downloading a course. There's more views on the website, etc. And 93% of people that we surveyed after the expo, they wanted further information about orienteering, which was then when we signposted to local clubs, etc. Another thing that we did via the Find Your Way funding was attend the Youth Sports Trust Conference. Again, totally different. This is more teachers, school sports partnerships, schools, etc. We did say we, the royal we, but Howard delivered a talk about how a virtual offer could help with PRU schools, pupil referral units, with SEN schools, etc. And we connected there with over 100 schools, connected them with local clubs, connected them with the Anytime Orienteering offer. And from being there, we then delivered training to 150 Youth Sports Trust leaders a couple of months down the line. And that was the basis for our new schools newsletter being launched as well. We've been at the Lincolnshire Show. Anyone that knows the Lincolnshire Show, it's a massive kind of agricultural show within Lincolnshire. Whilst we were there, we did a maze virtual orienteering courses, promoted, the local clubs. It's mostly locals that attend: Lincolnshire Orienteering Group, Nottingham Orienteering Club, Derwent Valley, for example. We were at the celebration of sport again. So all these opportunities that I keep kind of harking back to, they were only possible because we could fund them from the Find Your Way funding. And from there, get our foot in with the door with these organisations, say, we'll deliver an activity, you put us on the bump, you put us on the information. We're here to kind of serve. A major thing that Jason was a part of a couple of years ago was the Gilwell reunion. Jason was there for a couple of days with Caroline at Gilwell Park. We'd paid for Gilwell Park to be updated and some courses to be created on it. And there was different workshops that were led by Jason. I think he did 6 over the weekend, where he took people out, teaching them about the courses, how to access the app. And it was a fantastic success. There were so many people that came to the stand. There's an obvious link between Scouts and orienteering. On the survey that was sent out after the Gilwell reunion, as you can see in the bottom there, how likely are you to offer it? 80, the score there, 80 for people that had not previously offered it, and 73 for NPS for people that already had. So again, it was awareness that this resource is out there, and it's perfect for scout groups. And they're the kind of people that we get coming up to us at the Outdoor Expo saying, what can I do with my groups that's, easy to do and interactive as well. From being there through the funding, we've worked with the Scouts in the past year to develop their orienteering activity badge. We've managed to change a lot of it. We've managed to introduce some map run kind of elements to it in there. We've managed to get them to deliver about understanding an orienteering map and the colours, for example, rather than just know your countryside code. And again, a wider benefit. One of the big things that we've done for the past few years is the On Festival, again funded by the Find Your Way project. In the first year, it was brilliantly delivered by Lakeland Orienteering Club. Second year, last year, we delivered it ourselves. We've had people such as Marcus Scotney, who's famous in the trail and the fell running world, deliver a talk on our behalf about the benefits that he has in the sport. There's been map run courses around Grasmere that families can access, and showground courses, etc. So just being able to connect with people of the same mindset that might not know that A, orienteering's out there, and B, this offer is out there, has been massive for us. It's enabled us to open doors with the Royal Marines that were there, that have shared their access reports with us, that then our own access and environment officer has used. So little things, like, well, I say little things, but wider benefits like this that sometimes go unseen have massive impacts for us. And one of the final kind of things I want to talk about in terms of wider impact is the Big League. So this is run by the Outdoor Classroom. The Outdoor Classroom, doesn't use MapRun. It uses kind of its own intellectual property. It's fantastic kind of app developed by Josh Jenner, but it's still virtual orienteering. It's still using, computers and apps, etc., to get children orienteering. And the Big League is something that runs each year for the past couple of years. And overall, via the Big League, schools can sign up for free. We're able to see how many people have took part, how many hours have took part, and information is sent to the children. posts taking part in the event about the local clubs, about Go Orienteering, about how to access orienteering, British Schools Orienteering Association as well. So as you can see from the figures on the left-hand side, there's been a whole lot of activity that's been logged, a whole lot of pupils that have been taking part via the big league that we've been able to sponsor via the Find Your Way project. And this year, Peter Malloy did a fantastic video congratulating the schools on their successes, and as you can see here, they get a bit of a trophy and a signed shirt, etc. Some of the quotes at the bottom, which Josh kindly shared with us, feel excited to be part of a national competition. It made me feel that other people care about us, and a lot of the schools that you'll see on the left hand side are from the most hard to reach areas that have really took it on board. So to round off, our funding's been used widely. It's not just been used on clubs. It's not just been used on mapping. We have supported Open Orienteering, MAP and MAPRUM, without either one of them. MAPRUM, obviously, without it, the project wouldn't be the project, we would never have got the funding in the slightest. But we've heartily supported Open Orienteering, MAP as should be, really, from any club that's using the app. You may not know this, but Find Your Way funding paid for the developments for separate start and finish buttons on Open Orienteering to make it easier to make a score or linear button. It used to be kind of hidden away, the preview of the map, etc. So all that was funded by the Find Your Way project. MapRun, as I said, we've funded from day one and had great support from Peter and Pat. Couple of things we funded: the confirm finish button, people running through finish at come and try events, for etc. So these are just some of the things that that Find Your Way has kind of funded that you may not know about. So just some final slides, again from the sport structures. I won't read it all, but obviously this will be available to see on YouTube, and the slides available afterwards. But 72% delivery partners and clubs, they formed new partnerships, and that for us is massive in terms of the legacy. The funding's not there anymore, the projects aren't there anymore, but the relationships are, with councils, with permissions, with people reaching out to them, and all of a sudden that has a lasting impact on clubs. The training was seen as accessible to a wide range of partners, which is absolutely fantastic. This for me kind of ticks the Sport England box. They are massive on tackling inequalities, and Sports Butchers found independently that the project has been successful. Over 60% of people that actually took part in the kind of most hard to reach areas. So for Sport England reporting back, that's a massive tick for us. And this one as well, over 50% of partners highlighted that they had an increased awareness or significantly increased awareness of the local orienteering club. So we're not talking about the sport now, we're talking that the local orienteering clubs now are more visible to the most influential people of the areas. So again, we can read these, you can read these at your leisure. We reached out, well, Sports Structures reached out for some comments for people for the reports. We've been blown away by the support of a lot of clubs, and the kind of the appreciation, but it goes both ways. We couldn't have done this event, project, should I say, not event, without the kind of the openness and the willingness of the clubs to support us. And this one is a great read when you've got time to read it further on. Southampton Orienteering Club were part of year one. I won't say only year one, but it seems kind of a bit of a detriment to the work that Sock and Helen did down in Hampshire. But from just being part of it in year one, their previously testy, should we say, relationships with Eastleigh Borough Council have now turned into a flourishing relationship, should we say. And one of the sentences at the bottom, the ongoing partnership with EBC has paved the way for further opportunities, building lasting relationships within the community, fostering sustainable growth for orienteering. So again, harking back to the original KPIs, these are the things that are kind of unmeasurable that have made such a massive impact for our clubs and the sport. So I promise you, last couple of slides now, but summing up the wider benefits of the funding, we have such an easier time, and I say the royal we, but with councils now, with schools, with landowners, if you're offering come and try it events with councils and you're utilising their parks or their green spaces, I guarantee when you go back and ask for use within a club event, it is successful. And half of the time they drop the asking fees that they used to ask because you've done something for them, and it is reciprocal. You know, us ourselves, we've got better relationships with clubs. I don't think there's probably been as much outreach work before the Find Your Way project as there has been with clubs, and it's been an open dialogue between ourselves and clubs, and we've been honest with what has worked and what hasn't worked. And at the end of the day, we're both on the same page that we want more people to take part in the sport. I think, as I alluded to before, the social media pages and the updated websites from clubs speak for itself that, we have funded the majority of that, or we've at least helped with the majority of that and given advice. And people that have took part in the come and try activities, we've funded their training, we've funded them taking part in British Orienteering e-learning courses, for example. We've paid for first aid, we've paid for the mapping of areas, so it's all of the kind of stuff that doesn't get seen on the surface that has gone into enabling the Find Your Way project, that has kind of had the massive kind of wider benefits for the club. And I think just changing the perception, I think clubs possibly, hopefully, have a better perception of British Orienteering and what we're trying to do. Major partners have a better perception of the sport and understanding, and definitely the opportunities that both can offer each other. So I'll leave these learnings kind of on and for you to read in your own time, but they're just kind of like a surmise of what I've talked about, and these are some of kind of the learnings that I'll be talking about in the Come and Try It webinar in a couple of weeks' time as well. My kind of takeaways to clubs are be brave, go after funding, go after opportunities. We're still here for you, even though the project's finished. We're still here to offer advice and our learnings in terms of kind of how to carry on with this kind of legacy. None of this will go away. We want to see the Find Your Way project kind of sustained. And I guess the biggest thing on this slide is to actively demonstrate with partners. Like, don't be afraid to say, let's meet up at a local park. People are desperate to get out of the office, believe me, and people are desperate to kind of try something new. You walking around with people for 20 minutes showing them a map and course, it saves about 14 emails, them not understanding it and getting passed to somebody else. So, actively demonstrate with partners, ask them, tell them you'll meet them for a brew. It really does work. And I think for me, the last bit here, I think what we've got to kind of recognise with the project as well is that Sport England, it was absolutely fantastic, the funding that they gave us. We've never experienced it before, but what they were actively trying to do was they were trying to get us to kind of target the hardest people to target. So we weren't just targeting to people that were, already active and already willing to try new things. They wanted us to get into the hard to reach areas and to the least active. So any success has got to be celebrated if we've got any of those people out of their own house into their own green spaces, because that's a hard job. And it's an even harder job when it's something like orienteering, where it takes that bit of extra guts to try anyway, because it's not just like football, it's not just like netball or hockey or anything, and I think that's the biggest kind of success that we've had, is that we've managed to absolutely hit all the KPI targets with all of the wider benefits, and we've managed to do it with the people that are the hardest to reach as well. And that's, again, is a testament to everyone involved in the project. So that is me. I will stop sharing. Only 5 minutes over, so I do apologize for that, but a lot to talk about.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Kay. That was absolutely brilliant. And I know one thing, which is I will need those slides, because the amount of information on them is brilliant. So they will have to go out to everybody. Absolutely. So now is the time to open the floor for any questions. If anybody would like to pop them in the chat or Q&A, or you can use the raise hand feature and I'll call upon you to ask a question. And whilst people type away, I know in the Q&A there are... Oh, Jason is here. Jason is ready. Go on, Jason.
Yeah, hi guys. Well done, Kay, for that presentation. Thanks very much. And really good sort of roundup of the whole country. And there's a lot that I didn't know about now, actually, even for somebody that's very heavily involved in Dorset for 3 years. I just want to say, Caroline Barcham, good colleague of ours as well from Sealock, and the work that she did in the Northwest. Some of the things that they've been putting on that incorporate map run with folk. They're as good as any of these sort of like on original mountain things, or a lot of the good events that you can get involved in the outdoors. Any of those are just as good. So I just wanted to recognise Caroline, who sort of took over from you a little bit to do that work, and acknowledge her involvement in it, because she was a great colleague on that. And yeah, it's been a great pleasure to be involved in that. So well done, Kay. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you, Jason. And it was good to see in the chat as well as you go that you were popping in some extra comments too. So that was really good to see. Just having a quick look around. Oh, I can see a Roger hand up. You okay, Roger?
Yeah. Sorry, Joe. I can't get the chat to work for some reason. Anyway,
No problem.
thanks very much, Kay. Great presentation, and obviously huge momentum built up. And I think the key question is, how is this going to be maintained? There are a couple of points you made, very frankly, about, knockback in clubs and people asking, do I have to join a club to continue orienteering and things like that? And a lot of people said no, or a lot of people said we don't want to join a club. And I just wonder how you envisage this momentum continuing and ideally getting these people into the club system, because ultimately our club structure's got to survive.
Yeah, and I think that's probably a wider kind of conversation that we have in terms of turning participation into membership. I think, to answer your question in terms of how we keep the momentum, there's plenty going on in the background, which will hopefully come to fruition, including some stuff that Andrew obviously wants to get involved, get off the ground with the Orienteering Foundation and the CSSC, which I'm sure you're aware of, which kind of follows on from the Find Your Way project around Sheffield, etc. So we are still working with clubs in terms of keeping those partnerships alive, and in terms of, promoting map runs and promoting the anytime orienteering experience. In terms of turning participants into members, we're kind of coming at that from the kind of lived experience that we have at expos, when people are coming up to us and saying, I've always wanted to try this, but do I have to join a club? And, and I think that's the reality that we need to kind of face as a sport, is that, interestingly, we had this conversation internally today, myself, Howard and Peter Brook, in how do we go about turning people into members? And it's got to be a collaborative approach, because there's a lot of people these days that want to plug and play, and they want to do stuff in their own time, and they are, time poor, for want of a better word. And the anytime orienteering kind of offer, where people can go to permanent orienteering courses or pick up a map run in their own time, is perfectly suited. But then it's, as you say, how can we make those into club members? And then we look at people like Derwent Valley that are putting on kind of map runs and doing it as a club, for example. And I think for me, that's the biggest thing, that there's got to be that buy-in from clubs or from club members that are doing these activities, that it's always got to be signposted back to a club and said, if you've enjoyed this, this is what we're doing. These are the events that you can come along to. It's no good kind of working in silos. It's no good kind of putting on, activities that are just designed as activities, and people go away and they don't hear back from a club, or a club isn't sending on a follow-on email saying, this is what's coming up and are you interested, for example. So it's all about, it's as much on us as it is on the clubs, I think, personally, to make a welcoming atmosphere, to make a sociable atmosphere, to make it that people want to join a club, because straight off the bat these days, people are not going to join a club. So it's kind of like, what are the barriers to that? And then if it is accessibility and the anytime and that's what people are picking up, as I've just said, can we start to do what DVO are doing, like what Log are doing, and kind of making it more of a hybrid, that it's a club event, but it's a map run event. We get people in that way, socializing with our own members if they want to socialize, making them feel part of a club. Then they turn up to a level D event, then they do a couple of them, and then they start joining a club. So I think it's a whole kind of wider conversation, but definitely I think the biggest thing that we can do, and I say the we because I'm part of an orienteering club as well, is that we can signpost about the sport more. It's like, what are we all doing to signpost about the sport? Are we just putting on events to make money? Or are we actually putting on events to actually bring more people into the sport? Are we sending emails afterwards? Are we telling people thank you for coming? Are we sharing neighbouring club events? It's not about being selfish and thinking I want everyone to come to a PFO event. Go to a CLOC event, go to an SROC event. The more that people are orienteering and getting used to it, the more likelihood that they are going to join a club and be invested in the sport.
Yeah, I mean, it's great. You've got a lot of community support for it. The trick is to get the clubs working with that and mutually benefiting from the whole thing. And I really like the idea of tackling the more deprived communities. I think that's great because they do need opportunities to be active, get healthy, and all that sort of stuff.
A lot of the positive kind of benefit we had from people that we spoke to afterwards from these kind of communities were, and I guess it's the same for anyone, but they didn't realize that so many nice spaces were on their doorstep, and that was the biggest kind of feedback we had, that, oh, I've lived here 15 years and I didn't even realize that was there, and that part, I'll never go to that part normally because so and so, and that was the kind of biggest feedback that we got from a lot of people, was even if we've just had a nice, they might never take up orienteering, but actually they're exploring more their own communities, then that's kind of like a nice impact to have had on a community anyway.
Okay, thanks very much.
Excellent. Thank you, Roger, for the question. I'll jump the queue with one question because it's a direct follow-on, and then I'll go back to the correct order. Catherine has asked, following on from Roger's question, will you be doing some follow-up monitoring with the clubs involved in Find Your Way to see if the benefits come through with a bit of time in terms of participation in their events and membership growth?
Yeah, I mean, that's certainly in the pipeline. We are going to do that 6 months after the project finish, which is kind of the end of March, start of April time, and then towards September as well. Like I said, there are things in the pipeline to kind of keep the project alive and kind of awaken people's minds, etc. But I think for us, that's vital. We don't want it to be a flash in the pan. The Sports Structures report that came about highlighted that partners are keen to keep going as well, to keep activities, to keep come and try activities, and I guess we've got to kind of keep the clubs engaged enough that they see the benefit of come and try activities, like they did do with the Find Your Way project and everything else. We've still got to work with clubs to kind of showcase all the benefits that were in the Find Your Way project. But now that the funding's not there, what can we carry on doing as a collaborative? And as I said in the presentation, the support's still there, internally from ourselves and everything. It's just, what can we do together? So yeah, absolutely. Like clubs can expect to get harassed by ourselves at the end of March again and September again next year. Yeah. And again, not just getting figures and data, etc., but working together to come up with some new ideas as well.
Excellent. Thank you for that, Kate. And thank you, Catherine, for the question. Now I can go back in order again. So we have a question from Andy. He says, I understood that the original Sport England KPI targets was for 30,000 participants. Is that not the case? And then part two. If British Orienteering and Sport England and the clubs concerned consider the project to be a success, why hasn't the project been funded and continue for a further 3 years?
But to address the first point, I would have probably quit my job if it was 30,000 participants and probably cry myself. So I'm not sure where that comes from, but that one of the first slides that you saw with the original KPIs are taken directly from the contract that we signed jointly with Sport England. So they were the original KPIs that were agreed on. And secondly, with the funding, Sport England, as I alluded to, they have changed their funding patterns. For anybody that's in the know, they have now moved to the Movement Fund, which is a new kind of funding pattern for Sport England. So the agreement was only for 3 years anyway from the old funding pot. And their new funding pattern, the Movement Fund, is more designed, for want of a better word, to work with active partnerships rather than national governing bodies, and to work with councils and to work with different community groups. It's not to say that the funding isn't there for us. We would just have to work via an active partnership, for example. So a lot of the way that the funding from Sport England used to be given isn't given anymore, which is a shame for us. It's also a bit of a headache for active partnerships up and down the country. The Movement Fund was supposed to start giving out the funds early 2024, late 2023, I think. I know that some active partnerships are still waiting on that funding as well. And again, with the change of government, that has changed and pushed back some timelines as well. So unfortunately, we're not in the position that we were 4 or 5 years ago for Sport England funding.
Brilliant. Thank you for that, Kay. Thank you, Andy, for the question. I snuck back on the slides before to check the KPIs, and I think the number was, for number of participants actively taking part, was 1,000 per year and 1 and 2. So that hopefully ties up the first part of that question, but thank you again, Andy. Next, Josh just said a quick fantastic and thank you. Very thorough, and he's enjoyed hearing how successful the project's been. Alan asks, firstly says, very interesting, thank you. Did you consider alternatives to MapRun in particular? And I've been preparing to butcher this. Usinligo? We'll take that. That's used in Bristol.
Yeah, don't worry, Joe. I can't say it either. I can't spell it still to this day either. A brief answer is yes, we did initially. However, with it being kind of England wide, there wasn't enough hotspots of the app, of use of the U app, compared to MapRun. MapRun seemed at the time, and probably is true with what I'm saying as well, it seemed more popular with clubs at the time, and it seemed more widespread throughout England at the time than the other one. And getting a project off the ground with clubs anyway, it was kind of like take the path of least resistance. And so that was why kind of MapRun was favoured in that instance. And, you know, just moving forward as quickly as we could, we were aware that we had a certain amount of funding to kind of get through in a certain brief amount of time, which did pass very quickly over the 3 years.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Alan. I've been passed one from, and I don't know whether I already mentioned it. Nope, there's a new one at the top, so I'll do that. Catherine asks, says, first of all, it's very exciting to hear about. Do any of the participants now consider themselves orienteers? Do we consider them orienteers, and what should we call them?
Well, surely anyone that takes part in an orienteering activity can be an orienteer, can't they? But yeah, I mean, with the sports structures report, they reached out to people that took part, and they, you know, the people that took part, some of them still do mostly anytime orienteering, so permanent orienteering courses and MapRun orienteering courses, for example. And I think the biggest thing that we've kind of got to recognise, and it's hard for us as an NGB and hard for us as club members as well, is that, you know, we have to accept that we may never see the numbers that, you know, it might never bring in 5,000 new members, but as I've explained, with the wider benefits in terms of kind of awareness, people knowing that the sport's there, it's opened a lot of doors for people that are now aware of the sport, that will then, you know, if a club advertises a level D event on a local Facebook page. Now all of a sudden, because they've done some come and try events, etc., they're more open to doing events. So yeah, absolutely. Like I think, are they classed as orienteers? Like I think, you know, there is still a bit of snobbery around the sport, I would say, and there's still a little touch of snobbery around some clubs and, you know, some of our members that unless you're tackling a, you know, a TD5 course in the middle of forest somewhere, that you're not a true orienteer, or urban orienteering isn't proper orienteering. And anyone that knows me knows that, you know, my forte and my love is urban orienteering. And I came to the sport in 2019. You know, I never had heard of the sport before 2019. That I think as a collective, as a sport, we need to welcome people with open arms, whether they're doing a map run course, whether they're doing a permanent orienteering course, or whether they just want to get stuck into a course in a Lake District. Anyone that's running around with a map, we will gladly take as an orienteer into the sport.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Kate. And thank you very much, Catherine, for the question. I can confirm that I think part of being an orienteer also is how you feel. Having run one course, I can firmly say that I don't think I'm an orienteer, but I could be converted. Who knows? Maybe I need to go on Find Your Way course. Another question from Andy. Excuse me. Does British Orienteering still consider the label virtual orienteering as helpful, and are we going to continue to use the label?
Yeah, I think for me, I think as I covered at the start of the presentation, you know, come 2020 and early 2021 when the bid was put in, that was how it was collectively known. That was how we talked to partners. That's how councils know it. You know, I think, you know, there's probably difference of opinions across the sport, you know, whether people want to call it GPS based, you know, phone based orienteering, virtual orienteering. I think, you know, I go back to the kind of saying, you know, you go where the energy is. That, you know, if you've done things right, and if you've talked to partnerships right and councils right, and you've took them out and they've tried a map run course and everything else, that, you know, how it's branded and how it's delivered and how it's kind of, whether it's whatever it's called doesn't matter, because people have had that experience of trying a map run course, you know. And if clubs still want to publicize them as virtual orienteering courses, but yet they explain properly through their marketing what they are, you know, you use your phone, you get to a checkpoint, when you're there it beeps and everything. It's like, for me, it's not kind of that big an issue, you know. And as I explained, you know, in the presentation, the reason why we stuck with it throughout kind of, you know, the project was, that's what partners knew it as by, that's what Sport England knew it as by. You know, I'm sure if we were to change all the branding, if we were to change all of the roller banners, all of the promotional materials and everything like that, I'm sure our members would have described that as a waste of money for the project as well. So, you know, it's I don't know, for me, you know, it's horses for courses. People have strong opinions about it, like, you know, the word virtual itself, you know, not physically existing as such, but made to exist by software, you know, that if we're getting down to the technicalities of it. But, you know, it's like I say, it's how you get the message across. Like, if you are marketing your events to people in the correct way, they are turning up fully expecting that they're going to use the phones and the checkpoints aren't real, etc. You know, so be it. That, you know, whatever's best in your area for your people, like, crack on. We all want people to take part in orienteering.
And I'll thank you very much for that, Andy. Thank you, Kay. I will do one last one that Catherine's popped in, because we are coming up to the 8:30 mark. So I will theoretically close it off there, but I'm sure I'll pop Kay's email in the follow-up. So if you do have any more questions, you can pop them over. So Catherine asks, regarding the last question, so virtual orienteering or variants, has anybody asked the people we're trying to reach what they might understand outside of partners? Could there be any confusion with it being, you know, a computer game or anything like that?
It's not come up in any of the surveys and any of the kind of forums that, you know, we've had with people and everything. You know, it's not something that has been flagged to us. And again, I would like to put that down to the way that possibly the event, and their experience has been explained to them, and the way that clubs have explained to them. You know, I think, as I keep saying, if clubs are putting on vague information that, you know, it's just a virtual event, etc., then, you know, there could be some kind of misconception there. But, you know, I think these days there's enough kind of imagery out there. There's enough kind of shots that you could do with your mobile phone, an example of maps, etc. There's enough out there that you can put out there to save any confusion. But no, it's not been raised as a point that someone doesn't understand it, or they turned up expecting something else and didn't get something else, you know. So again, like, let's look at how we're marketing things and explaining things. And that was part of the reason why, if we wind back to when I started talking an hour and a half ago, that was why the guides were made and sent out to partners and sent out to people, so they could understand fully. They were going to download an app. This is what was going to happen. When you get to the start, it'll beep. You need to make your own. So again, it's what can you give to the participant beforehand or at the event to allay any of them kind of fears or misconceptions that people may have.
Brilliant. Thank you, Catherine, for that question. And thank you, Kay. Roger, I'll sneak you in. I'll sneak in a last one.
Yeah, this is just very, very quick. I think, you know, with all these people trying out orienteering through Find Your Way, there's potentially a long-term legacy in that, and that quite often parents in the future bring their kids along because they tried orienteering when they were at school. But I do think that there has to be a bolt on at the end of all of this that gets people to migrate or progress from virtual orienteering, which is a form of orienteering, but it's not like the traditional forest and mountainside, you know, stuff. They've got to get them across the boundary into a typical local event. And I would say we need to be building on this, actually. It's a great opportunity to build on this with the numbers involved. Yeah, sorry.
No, I agree with you, Roger. But I wholeheartedly agree with you. But at the end of the day, if we wind back to what the funding was for, and again, it wasn't about participation in our sport, and it wasn't participation in about our members. So it's kind of, it's then, you know, it's, if people only want to do permanent orienteering courses or map run courses and they don't want to try anything else, I 100% agree with you, and I would love participation to grow and club members to grow. But on the flip side, if people only want to take part in orienteering by doing those as well, then, you know, I come back to a phrase called market Stalinism that Sport England said to me in one of the very first meetings that I had with them, that you can't just cut off one type of person because you're trying to get something else. So if we only get a subset of 6,000 people that want to do the sport via the anytime orienteering opportunities, then we can't kind of like look down on that as well, because it's still people doing the sport.
No.
You know, they'll still tell the neighbour, who then the neighbour might feel confident enough to come to a level D event as well. But I 100% agree with what you're saying. Like, we've got to work with clubs now to bridge that gap. But at the same time, some people don't want to bridge that gap. So we need to recognise that as well.
Okay, thanks.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Roger. The snuck in question. And I suppose the best thing I can think of is, you know, changing up one of the quotes for any orienteering is good orienteering.
Yeah.
Now that's an original from me. You can keep that one. In any case, I will bring things to a close. Thank you very much, everybody, for attending. Thank you, Kate, for that brilliantly informative session. This is going to be an absolute monster of a video available with so much resourcing for everybody. It's going to be really good to have everybody able to access that. And I will be uploading the video tomorrow and getting the email out as well with the slides on for everybody to enjoy. As a little plug, the next session will be next week, and that'll be the 2025 safeguarding update with the NSPCC. It can always be a hard sell, a safeguarding session, but I hope if anybody here is interested or needs to know a little bit more about the updates, that you'd attend. That'll be with Peter Brook and Liza Ware from the NSPCC. Same time as always, 7 o'clock. and I hope to see some of you there. On the email, I'll pop out the feedback form, which if you do have a moment to fill in will be greatly appreciated. It also includes the best box of all, which is what topics you'd like for the sessions, because I am absolutely committed to making sure that the sessions we put on are for what our members want, and also a few extra bits on there as well. But in that case, I will quickly wrap it up and wish you all a good rest of your evening, and I look forward to seeing you again in another session. Bye bye.